British forces there. And the Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, has issued his reaction to the beginning of war. He says now that war has started, everyone will hope that it will be as short as possible, with the minimum number of casualties, if Saddam Hussein will quickly understand that he can prevent unnecessary death and destruction by surrendering. The whole world will share the sense of relief. In Washington, the BBC's Washington correspondent David McNeil. Hello, David.
Hello.
There has been a statement from Marlin Fitzwater. Let's recap. It was about half an hour ago. What was it that he said?
He began with the words, "The liberation of Kuwait has begun," and said that in conjunction with the forces of the coalition partners, the United States had moved under the code name Operation Desert Storm to enforce the mandates of the UN Security Council. And as of 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Desert Storm forces were engaging targets in Kuwait and Iraq. The next we expect to hear is from President Bush in an hour's time. Half an hour after that, a briefing from the Pentagon. We expect to hear confirmation of what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, predicted several months ago. He said, when we launch an attack, we will launch it violently, we will launch it in a way that will make it decisive so we can get it over as quickly as possible, and there's no question who won.
Where will the information come now from for reporters such as you, David, in Washington?
Well, we will hear from the President. Obviously, he's speaking to the nation in an hour's time. He's already contacted leaders of Congress.
A series of attacks due west of the city from our vantage point, and now we're seeing a lot of activity in the area of this refinery. One thing after another, one bomb apparently coming down in the area of this refinery. It is not on fire. Oh, now there's something on fire. That was an explosion fairly near our location at near a mosque in downtown. We could sort of feel the report from that. Another refinery closer to our hotel, which is under attack. This one is in the close vicinity of the presidential palace here in Baghdad. The anti-aircraft guns near our hotel.
It was, however, still not clear whether the hostilities had actually officially started. None of the fighter planes, none of the reports mentioned fighter planes above Baghdad. However, then came the announcement that war had indeed broken out. The White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater addressed the press in Washington.
I have a statement by the President of the United States. The liberation of Kuwait has begun. In conjunction with the forces of our coalition partners, the United States has moved under the code name Operation Desert Storm to enforce the mandates of the United Nations Security Council. As of 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Operation Desert Storm forces were engaging targets in Kuwait and Iraq. President Bush will address the nation at 9 o'clock p.m. tonight from the Oval Office. I'll try to get you more as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
The first F-15 fighter bombers took off from a base in central Saudi Arabia shortly before 11 o'clock London time.
The bombing is intensifying now, and the explosions are coming closer to this part of town. There's lots of targets here that the U.S. may be interested in terms of communication centers, presidential palace, and other matters. The sky is illuminated now by very large flashes of explosions that I really don't know what they are.
Which broadcasts 24 hours a day, is said to be the favourite viewing of President Bush. So, as you can imagine, probably within the White House, apart from conferring with officials, President Bush is also keeping one eye as to what is actually happening in CNN. Those reporters have been able to get their words out. They've been eyewitnesses, if you can say that, in the middle of the night, given the cover of darkness, as to what's actually going on in Baghdad. They've heard in the background the noises, as you heard in Matt's report there. Let's see if we can go back to CNN to find out if there's any latest news from them.
Over many, many weeks and months, the officials with whom we have discussed say that there are no reports so far of any U.S. fighter aircraft or bombers destroyed, anything along those lines. Indeed, there is a confidence. There is at this point here at the Pentagon all the indications that this United States assault is moving just as it has been planned now for many, many weeks. Back to you, David.
Charles Jaco is standing by for us in Dhahran. We remember when we last saw him, he was hastily grabbing a gas mask.
Well, as you heard, the CNN reporters there were coming out from the Pentagon, and they've just gone back to their man in Dhahran. Why don't we go to our man in Jerusalem, Alex Brody, who's on the line now. Alex, how aware is Israel of what is going on at the present moment?
Well, we have no indication yet that Israel is involved. Of course, the great fear of Israel is that in the early minutes of the war, that Saddam will unleash something in this direction. So far, we have no indication that anything has come.
What about reaction to the fact that action has actually started with these air raids over Baghdad? Has there been any reaction to that in political or military circles in Jerusalem tonight?
I have nothing yet, Peter, to tell you.
So, in other words, effectively, all you know is that it has started and Israel is waiting to see what will happen.
That's right. I mean, here in Jerusalem, it is, of course, it's 3 in the morning. There is very little activity. The only activity there is in the streets are a few cars moving very fast and with flashing lights. Obviously, people are scrambling and obviously people are gearing up. But we have no indication yet that there is any problem as far as Israel is concerned.
Alex Brody in Jerusalem, thank you very much indeed. Well, a short time ago, the Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashton, gave this reaction to the news that the action has now started. We had official confirmation of that from the White House, Marlin Fitzwater, who announced just over half an hour ago that the liberation of Kuwait, as he put it, had started. This is what Paddy Ashton said in answer to a question from a reporter.
Well, it's the moment we all hoped wouldn't happen, but it's now arrived. The standing of international law and the authority of the United Nations is now the purpose of our action, and I think everybody in Britain must hope, pray and work for a quick victory with the minimum of casualties.
Were you surprised that the attack was on Baghdad rather than in Kuwait?
Well, we don't know that that's the case, but what is absolutely certain is that the UN resolution legitimizes the liberation of Kuwait. But that will mean that we have to ensure that those air forces that could prevent that, chemical weapons establishment, communications, maybe even nuclear facilities, will have to be destroyed, that could threaten the liberation of Kuwait itself, and that appears to be what is now in progress.
Well, that was Paddy Ashton, the Liberal Democrat leader, responding to the news that the action has started. As I said, we have confirmation of that from the White House about 40 minutes ago. Here's Jonathan Lyne, who has details of British forces' involvement in this action. Jonathan?
Yes, in statements around midnight, the Foreign Office and Ministry of Defence in London confirmed that hostilities had begun and that British forces were involved. In a short statement, the Defence Ministry said, "The multinational forces in the Gulf, including British units, have been in action tonight." The statement went on, "We are not making any further comment at this stage." The Ministry says the Prime Minister, Mr Major, will be making a statement at breakfast time. There are no details yet on which British units have been involved. The Defence Ministry spokesman said only that the United States-led alliance was staging an air raid against Iraqi forces. "This is it," he said. "It has begun."
Thank you, Jonathan. We'll just come into the studio now. Here's Roger Hearing, who has actually stayed in the hotel, the Al Rashid, where we've been hearing those remarkable reporters from CNN talking about the bomb attack on Baghdad. They've been hearing the explosions, and they've been telling their people in Atlanta, the head offices of CNN, exactly what has been going on as they see it from the perspective of, as I say, this Al Rashid hotel. Where exactly is this hotel, Roger?
Well, the Rashid Hotel is on the main side of the river where most of the government buildings are. It's quite near the Ministry of Information, the main communications centre, Iraqi television, and various of the main monuments that are in that part of the city. It's not the part of the city where most of the population are, but it's the position, really, I suppose, where most of the main targets there would be for a bombing raid.
How far would it be from Saddam Hussein's actual headquarters, war room?
Well, where Saddam Hussein's real war room is a subject I should think a lot of people on the Allied side would be very interested to know. Certainly one of his main palaces is on that side, and certainly it's one that he stays in very often, but he does move around a great deal. You constantly see motorcades going through the streets, and there's every suggestion that he would move around as rapidly as possible to avoid obviously presenting a target.
So in other words, if somebody thought that the way to bring this war to a quick end would be to take out Saddam Hussein, the chances are that these reporters would be literally in the firing line, given the position that they are in now.
Well, one obviously doesn't know about the accuracy of what the Americans may in fact be chucking at Baghdad at the moment. But I think, clearly, yes, they certainly are in the firing line. One has to remember that it's one of the tallest buildings in that part of the city. It's a very prominent building, and I suppose in the confusion, the fog of war, it's certainly not impossible that it could be mistaken for one of the bigger ministries.
Does it have any basement or anything like that where people could actually go if it became the centre of attention by air forces?
Well, when I was there, we were told that this building, which was in fact put up for a non-aligned conference that was due to take place in the early 1980s, is in fact very well equipped. It has a large bomb shelter in the basement.
That would probably be my guess. That's the only reason I'd be up there, John.
Yeah. Bernie Shaw is going to come over and talk to us now. Bernie?
Well, I just wanted to chime in on this speculation. They could be choppers, those choppers that have the very, very quiet engines.
Yeah, and they could be at a great distance away from us.
You mean our choppers or their choppers? I mean U.S. choppers or Iraqi choppers?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I very much doubt that multinational force choppers are this far into the country. If they are, it would be another kind of operation.
Then they would have to be Iraqi choppers. Yeah. I know that I saw 2 choppers go by this hotel window.
Yeah. Well, I know early in the morning we've seen several runs by choppers by the hotel. Helicopters, of course. The Soviet Hind helicopters are the ones that they use mostly here in Iraq. Now, way off in the distance, many, many miles away, you can hear these blasts again coming through. Some more anti-aircraft fire. And I guess a little bit lower down on the ground, I'll once again let you hear the sound of what is going on over Baghdad tonight.
Well, as you heard there, that's the sound of what's going on over Baghdad tonight, as heard by 2 CNN reporters in the Al Rashid Hotel near the government buildings. On the line now from Bahrain is Phil Jones, who I think has some details of British Air Force involvement. Do you not, Phil?
Well, again, we heard a great deal here at about 10 to 2 local time. That was about 2 hours, 20 minutes ago. What we heard was the sound of heavy aircraft taking off and then more aircraft following the big heavy jets. But of course, there's no civil aviation flying out of here at all. So obviously we assume that this was military aircraft. And it seems that local sources here are saying that what we were hearing was 2 Victor tankers. These are the tankers they put in the air to refuel the fighters and the bombers in mid-air. They took off first, followed about 10 minutes later, we're told, or we think, by at least 1 squadron, that would be 4 aircraft, Tornado bombers. These followed them. Now we assume that the tankers have been put in the air to refuel these bombers, so how far they're going, we don't know. It's 250 miles to the Kuwaiti border and obviously a lot further than that to Baghdad.
Christopher Gunnis.
The UN Security Council had just broken off discussions on the occupied territories when news broke that Operation Desert Storm had begun. As word spread, a crowd gathered in the Security Council chamber, anxiously watching live television coverage of the US bombing raids on Baghdad. Speaking to reporters, a stunned Secretary-General, Javier Pérez de Cuellar, expressed his deep sorrow. He said that as head of a peaceful organisation and after the efforts of so many personalities, he was saddened by the outbreak of hostilities, and he indicated that he had not been informed by the Americans that an attack was imminent. An angry Cuban ambassador, Ricardo Alarcón, who from the beginning has opposed the use of force, said what has happened is a severe blow to the prestige and standing of the United Nations.
These have uncorked new kinds of anti-aircraft weapons. I don't know what they are, but
they appear to be heavier caliber,
they are spurting fire into the sky, heavier caliber. I don't know what they are, but they are more impressive than that used earlier. They're obviously uncorking other extra anti-aircraft defenses as this battle progresses.
Just one comment. Clearly, I've never been there, but this feels like we're in the center of hell.
It's a remarkable experience to be here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and the night sky again lit up with beautiful red and orange tracers and white flashes again as airbursts continue to come, probably from the anti-aircraft guns, from all we can tell. And all around us now we hear explosions, big explosions at great distances away from our location. As Secretary Weinberger was mentioning in his interview just now, Peter, they are not apparently, the Allies, the coalition forces are not targeting civilian targets apparently at all. And all the anti-aircraft fire, and we see more of it to the south right now, going straight up, seems to be very far from the center of town.
Well, right in front of me, John, to, I guess, the north, I see a series of surface-to-air missiles being fired up. They look like that to me. They're going straight in the sky. Who knows what they're aiming at? They're aimed at the attacking force, but there were about 5 were launched just within seconds of each other.
Yeah, it's going to boom, 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 boom.
They just went right up there, right into the sky.
Right, and it's we'll have to tell you again, and for our families who are listening to our broadcast now, all of this is happening very far away from where we are. It's nighttime, so everything is brightly illuminated, but you should know that for the present time anyway, we're safe, and all the action is very visible to us, but it's very far away from us. Bernie Shaw.
Well, that was John Hallinan and his colleague of cable news network CNN at the centre of this crisis, which has now become a war. Our reporter Jonathan Birchall is in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, and he's been talking to a Kuwaiti citizen who's in the city.
And we're very happy about what's happening.
Are you Kuwaiti?
Yeah, I'm a Kuwaiti citizen, yes.
What do you think will happen now?
Well, I think as we've heard and seen and been published about the scenario, what's going to happen, an airstrike, a massive airstrike. This is what we're hearing now. And we're listening to the American Armed Forces radio right now, and we believe there's a massive airstrike going on right now.
Are you worried about what will happen to Riyadh and to Saudi Arabia? Do you think that there will be retaliation?
I doubt it very much, really. I think there's no way for them to start to do anything.
I can only be saddened by the beginning of hostilities.
Well, that was a brief comment there by much saddened, as he put it, Perez de Cuellar, the Secretary-General of the United Nations. Well, a sense of prolonging the war because that would be in their interest.
Well, we don't know the reason for that. That could be quickly outdated, of course. We don't know what the missiles are doing. And I doubt if that kind of information will be released very quickly if missiles do land in certain places, because it's of prime military importance to the Iraqis to know where their missiles have landed.
Maybe it's for our own good, maybe not. We don't know whether these windows are going to shatter under blasts or not, but there's some beautiful tracer fire outside now. It's way up in the air. It's bright red blasts and yellow blasts, and with the windows closed, we can't hear as well as we were able to hear before. But it continues to go on outside now. We don't, because we can't hear as well, we can't really tell you as much about what's going on as we would have been able to with the window open. Well, these security fellows also took some of the videotape out of one of our cameras. They say we'll get it back tomorrow. I'm a little skeptical that we will, but it was the beautiful pictures that we took to go along with the commentary that you heard earlier tonight on CNN.
Well, those are the three intrepid CNN reporters who, at the present moment, are holed up in the Al Rashid Hotel near the...
Sirens are sounding again here. Since the news of the attack on Baghdad, there's been a flurry of activity at the Ministry of Defense. Cars have been arriving. At the hotel where we're staying, the guard at the door is now wearing complete chemical warfare equipment. A man's coming out with a towel across his face, presumably because he's worried about the risk of chemical attack. Police cars and civil defense cars travelling up and down with flashing lights. There are still cars about and the lights are still on. There's no total blackout whatsoever. Earlier this evening, most of us were woken up by the deafening sound of 4 heavy planes going overhead, which I'm told were refueling tankers, which presumably were going out to fuel the planes which were attacking Iraq and Kuwait. Since then, it's been largely quiet. Some fighters have been seen circling the city. Now it's quiet again.
Well, that was Jonathan Birchall in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Let's go to another part of Saudi Arabia, to Dhahran, where our defence correspondent, Mark Leahy, is now on the line. Mark, what news do you have for us from Dhahran?
Well, we're still waiting for the return of the first waves of strike aircraft. We've had another air raid warning here, which caused a scuttle for the shelters and then a return. So we're still basically waiting for the final word from Washington, which is where we're really going to get the first hard information on it. I mean, the news blackout here is quite intense. We're just waiting for confirmation of how many aircraft have come back. At the moment, there are no indications of losses. The rumours filtering back is that the attacks have gone to plan, which I think is pretty much what you would expect.
10 minutes, and it's clearly something he's mulled over in great detail as this crisis in the Gulf has built towards the moment of confrontation which is now upon us.
Here he is.
And the President is speaking.
Allied Air Forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined. This military action, taken in accord with United Nations resolutions and with the consent of the United States Congress, follows months of constant and virtually endless diplomatic activity on the part of the United Nations, the United States, and many, many other countries. Arab leaders sought what became known as an Arab solution, only to conclude that Saddam Hussein was unwilling to leave Kuwait. Others traveled to Baghdad in a variety of efforts to restore peace and justice. Our Secretary of State, James Baker, held an historic meeting in Geneva, only to be totally rebuffed. This past weekend, in a last-ditch effort, the Secretary General of the United Nations went to the Middle East with peace in his heart, his second such mission, and he came back from Baghdad with no progress at all in getting Saddam Hussein to withdraw from Kuwait. Now, the 28 countries with forces in the Gulf area have exhausted all reasonable efforts to reach a peaceful resolution, have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force. We will not fail. As I report to you, air attacks are underway against military targets in Iraq. We are determined to knock out Saddam Hussein's nuclear bomb potential. We will also destroy his chemical weapons facilities. Much of Saddam's artillery and tanks will be destroyed. Our operations are designed to best protect the lives of all the coalition forces by targeting Saddam's vast military arsenal. Initial reports from General Schwarzkopf are that our operations are proceeding according to plan. Our objectives are clear. Saddam Hussein's forces will leave Kuwait. The legitimate government of Kuwait will be restored to its rightful place, and Kuwait will once again be free. Iraq will eventually comply with all relevant United Nations resolutions, and then, when peace is restored, it is our hope that Iraq will live as a peaceful and cooperative member of the family of nations, thus enhancing the security and stability of the Gulf. Some may ask, why act now? Why not wait? The answer is clear. The world could wait no longer. Sanctions, though having some effect, showed no signs of accomplishing their objective. Sanctions were tried for well over 5 months, and we and our allies concluded that sanctions alone would not force Saddam from Kuwait. While the world waited, Saddam Hussein systematically raped, pillaged, and plundered a tiny nation, no threat to his own. He subjected the people of Kuwait to unspeakable atrocities, and among those maimed and murdered, innocent children. While the world waited, Saddam sought to add to the chemical weapons arsenal he now possesses an infinitely more dangerous weapon of mass destruction, a nuclear weapon. And while the world waited, while the world talked peace and withdrawal, Saddam Hussein dug in and moved massive forces into Kuwait. While the world waited, while Saddam stalled, more damage was being done to the fragile economies of the Third World, the emerging democracies of Eastern Europe, to the entire world, including to our own economy. The United States, together with the United Nations, exhausted every means at our disposal to bring this crisis to a peaceful end. However, Saddam clearly felt that by stalling and threatening and defying the United Nations, he could weaken the forces arrayed against him. While the world waited, Saddam Hussein met every overture of peace with open contempt. While the world prayed for peace, Saddam prepared for war. I had hoped that when the United States Congress, in historic debate, took its resolute action, Saddam would realize he could not prevail and would move out of Kuwait in accord with the United Nations resolutions. He did not do that. Instead, he remained intransigent, certain that time was on his side. Saddam was warned over and over again to comply with the will of the United Nations, leave Kuwait or be driven out. Saddam has arrogantly rejected all warnings. Instead, he tried to make this a dispute between Iraq and the United States of America. Well, he failed. Tonight, 28 nations, countries from 5 continents, Europe and Asia, Africa and the Arab League, have forces in the Gulf area standing shoulder to shoulder against Saddam Hussein. These countries had hoped the use of force could be avoided. Regrettably, we now believe that only force will make him leave. Prior to ordering our forces into battle, I instructed our military commanders to take every necessary step to prevail as quickly as possible and with the greatest degree of protection possible for American and Allied servicemen and women. I've told the American people before that this will not be another Vietnam. And I repeat this here tonight. Our troops will have the best possible support in the entire world, and they will not be asked to fight with one hand tied behind their back. I'm hopeful that this fighting will not go on for long and that casualties will be held to an absolute minimum. This is an historic moment. We have in this past year made great progress in ending the long era of conflict and Cold War. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. We have no argument with the people of Iraq. Indeed, for the innocents caught in this conflict, I pray for their safety. Our goal is not the conquest of Iraq. It is the liberation of Kuwait. It is my hope that somehow the Iraqi people can, even now, convince their dictator that he must lay down his arms, leave Kuwait, and let Iraq itself rejoin the family of peace-loving nations. Thomas Paine wrote many years ago, "These are the times that try men's souls." Those well-known words are so very true today. But even as planes of the multinational forces attack Iraq, I prefer to think of peace, not war. I am convinced not only that we will prevail, but that out of the horror of combat will come the recognition that no nation can stand against a world united. No nation will be permitted to brutally assault its neighbor. No president can easily commit our sons and daughters to war. They are the nation's finest. Ours is an all-volunteer force, magnificently trained, highly motivated. The troops know why they're there, and listen to what they say, for they've said it better than any president or prime minister ever could. Listen to Hollywood Huddleston, Marine Lance Corporal. He says, "Let's free these people so we can go home and be free again." And he's right. The terrible crimes and tortures committed by Saddam's henchmen against the innocent people of Kuwait are an affront to mankind and a challenge to the freedom of all. Listen to one of our great officers out there, Marine Lieutenant General Walter Boomer. He said, "There are things worth fighting for. A world in which brutality and lawlessness are allowed to go unchecked isn't the kind of world we're going to want to live in." Listen to Master Sergeant J.P. Kendall of the 82nd Airborne. "We're here for more than just the price of a gallon of gas. What we're doing is going to chart the future of the world for the next 100 years. It's better to deal with this guy now than 5 years from now." And finally, we should all sit up and listen to Jackie Jones, an Army lieutenant, when she says, "If we let him get away with this, who knows what's going to be next? I've called upon Hollywood and Walter and JP and Jackie and all their courageous comrades in arms to do what must be done. Tonight, America and the world are deeply, deeply grateful to them and to their families. And let me say to everyone listening or watching tonight, when the troops we've sent in finish their work, I'm determined to bring them home as soon as possible. Tonight, as our forces fight, they and their families are in our prayers. May God bless each and every one of them and the coalition forces at our side in the Gulf, and may he continue to bless our nation, the United States of America.
Well, that was President George Bush live from the White House just after 14 minutes past 2 here in Britain, 14 minutes past 9 in the evening in the United States. Our correspondent, Jeremy Harris, was watching what the President had to say in Washington. Alongside me, Paul Reynolds, our diplomatic correspondent, was watching here. Can I come to you first, Jeremy, a reaction to the message that the President was getting across and his tone? We seem to have lost Jeremy Harris for the moment. Can I put that question to you, Paul?
Yes, one of the small things that struck me was the way he personalised this. He called him Saddam all the time. Did you notice that? He talked about Saddam stalled and Saddam must realise he would not prevail. Saddam was warned over and over again.
See Dick Cheney and Colin Powell at the Pentagon. Let's go to live coverage of their press conference.
Well, thank you very much, Pete. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you all heard the speech a short time ago by the President. And while there is not a great deal we can add now, we did want to be as forthcoming as we can with you. At 7 o'clock tonight, as you all know by now, Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Thursday morning in the Gulf, the armed forces of the United States began an operation at the direction of the President to force Saddam Hussein to withdraw his troops from Kuwait and to end his occupation of that country. At the direction of the President, I signed the execute order yesterday afternoon to undertake this operation, subject to certain conditions.
This is Dick Cheney, the United States Secretary of Defense,
only
speaking
after
now.
we've met the terms of the resolution passed last Saturday by the Congress. Those conditions have been complied with and proper notice has been given as required. And the operation was not to take place if there had been any last-minute diplomatic breakthroughs. The operation underway tonight, taking place in the pre-dawn darkness of the Persian Gulf, involves allied air forces of 4 nations: the United States, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. As they undertake their missions, they do so after months of careful planning. At the direction of the President, great care has been taken to focus on military targets, to minimize U.S. casualties, and to do everything possible to avoid injury to civilians in Iraq and Kuwait. The targets being struck tonight are located throughout Iraq and Kuwait. Our focus is on the destruction of Saddam Hussein's offensive military capabilities, the very capabilities that he used to seize control of Kuwait and that make him a continuing threat to the nations of the Middle East. These are the same capabilities that now threaten American and allied forces in the Gulf. Our goal, the same one we have maintained throughout Operation Desert Shield, is to liberate Kuwait and enforce the resolutions of the UN Security Council. This portion of the campaign, directed against Saddam Hussein's offensive military force, is an enormously complex undertaking. It involves all of the services of the United States military and hundreds of U.S. and allied aircraft. It is an ongoing operation, and we must therefore limit the kind and the amount of information that we provide in these early stages. This obviously is different from what happened in Panama in December of 1989, where most of the operation was over by the morning of the first day. We understand your need for information about what will happen next, and we are well aware of our obligation to keep the American people informed. But you must also understand that we cannot talk about future operations without putting at risk the safety of those who will have to carry them out. I believe I can speak for all of us at the Pentagon tonight when I say that we had hoped to settle this matter peacefully. This has clearly been an agonizing decision for the President and the Congress of the United States. And we've reached the point of committing our forces to battle very reluctantly, only after the most careful consideration. But no one should doubt our ability and our resolve to carry out our mission and to achieve our objective. I have great confidence in the professionalism, the dedication, and the determination of the men and women of our armed forces. They are, without question, the finest young sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines this nation has ever sent in harm's way. I want to assure all Americans that we will do our very best to carry out the President's orders as quickly and efficiently as possible and at the lowest cost possible. We'd be happy to respond to a few questions.
General Powell, can you describe the Iraqi Air Force's resistance, if any, their losses so far, and to what extent do you think that you've already achieved air superiority there?
Well, the operation's only 2.5 hours old, so I'm not quite prepared to take on your second question. So far, there has been no air resistance.
Can you tell us if there's been any casualties so far?
We will, at the appropriate time, be releasing information on casualties. We're not prepared to release any specifics now. I will simply say that the preliminary reports we have received in terms of the success of the operation, and that includes the possibility of casualties, have been very, very encouraging. The operation appears to have gone very well.
What can you tell us about the Scud missiles that have been reportedly launched by Iraq?
There have been a number of reports of Scud missiles, but insofar as I am aware, they basically are false reports. General Powell may want to say
Give us a
something.
rundown on the types of aircrafts and numbers that were involved.
General
in the,
Powell is about to answer this question.
I really can't at this time because it is an ongoing operation. Let me just say that it involved the Air Forces mentioned by Secretary Cheney and sorties in the hundreds.
Were there cruise missiles involved with that?
I won't comment on specific weaponry. It's an ongoing operation.
What targets were we bombing near Baghdad, and have we bombed any facilities where we think Saddam Hussein might be?
We have not been targeting Mr. Saddam Hussein. The purpose of our bombing facilities in the area of Baghdad is essentially to go after the command and control system of the Iraqi armed forces. And we're looking at principally military targets, command and control installations, air defense sites that could put our planes at risk, but they are militarily oriented targets.
Have you targeted any Iraq response of any kind?
The response of the Iraqi forces at this point has been limited, I think would be the best way to characterize it. But again, let me emphasize, as General Powell did, we are in the very early stages of this operation. It is likely to run for a long period of time. I realize you've all got legitimate questions about it, but there simply are things we do not know yet because it is an ongoing operation, because pilots are just now returning, and there'll be a lot of work required to assess the success of the initial efforts, and there'll be a lot of follow-up work required as well.
Could you tell us, please, whether or not there have been any indications whatsoever that the Iraqi troops, the 540,000 Iraqi troops in the Kuwaiti theater, have been cut off from their command and control headquarters in Baghdad?
I wouldn't want to speculate on that at this point, Wolf.
What about, Mr. Secretary, can I follow up, please? Sure. Can I follow up? The President said this was strictly an air operation for the time being. When does the U.S. decide to send in the ground forces?
It is strictly an air operation for the time being, and I wouldn't want to speculate on the point at which additional forces might be engaged.
Have your targets tonight, or did any Navy planes?
Murat said on the McNeil Air News Hour this evening that we are, quote, now prisoners of our own country, in our own country. Now that we've defended ourselves from naked aggression in the Middle East, how do we defend ourselves here at home from terrorist attacks?
I'm confident that we can deal with the terrorist threat.
Have our targets thus far included tanks and artillery?
I don't want to get into specific target sets yet. As the information comes in and builds over time, and we can give it to you historically, we will give it out, but I'm not prepared to go into specific target sets and what targets have been hit and have not, because it really is just too early to give you that kind of bomb damage assessment.
If Saddam Hussein says tomorrow, I give up, I'm sorry, I will withdraw from Kuwait, will you have a pause in your air campaign, or will you continue with it until you knock out all the priority targets?
I will do whatever the President of the United States directs us to do through the Secretary of Defense.
Secretary, from a military perspective, what went into your thinking in deciding to launch the attack at this point this evening? What were the factors?
Well, I think there were several factors. course, the President made the basic decision to commit the force. It was affected by, among other things, the expiration of the United Nations deadline that had been set on November 30th when the Security Council voted for the use of any means necessary to get him out. I think it was affected in part as a result of consultation with our allies, but it also was based upon the advice of our senior military commanders in terms of picking a time when conditions appeared to be most favorable for undertaking the operation. Let me emphasize, though, that the procedure we went through was to plan for execution of the operation at a point after the expiration of the United Nations deadline, but I had no authority to execute the plan until the President instructed me yesterday afternoon to do so, and it was at that point that we signed out the execute order with the qualifiers I mentioned in my opening statement.
Those favorable factors, can you tell us what some of those were?
Well, there we were, monitoring the press conference being given by Dick Cheney, the United States Secretary of Defense, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell. As you heard there, particularly General Powell is not prepared to go into great detail about what is happening. He says he's going to give that information historically when they've got bomb damage assessment and they know exactly what is going on.